can I come over and do this podcast from your house? So yeah, the power's out, and it went on and it went off again. And I thought, this is not.
Is this part of the rolling blackouts or unrelated?
No, I think this is just some random outage that SoCal Edison are experiencing. So life in paradise. So I'm in a friend. I'm literally, this is very pandemic 2020. I'm in a friend's kitchen working. So
See, but it's very nice to have. It's nice to have friends who allow you to do that.
It is, yeah. I mean, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was, it's good. It's worked out.
Well, Simon, earlier this year we had Sebastian Blanco on the show. He had really lousy internet connection, but he said, "Hey, guess what? The local library has terrific internet, and it's closed." So he got in his car, drove over there, hooked up there, and we did the whole show with him sitting in the car.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You got to do what you got to do right now. Yeah.
That's right.
It's very funny to see the guy, sitting there in his front seat holding the computer so he could get the signal from the library.
Don't you just hate living in the future?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's the future, but it's not the future. It's the future as translated by the past. Where's the SpaceX internet that's supposed to be beaming out of the sky? That's my question. I thought that was what was going to happen. We're going to get it from the sky. Anyway, are we on?
Well,
yes.
we're live right now. The show has not yet officially started.
Okay.
John, what are the cars behind you? I've got to ask. What are the model cars behind you?
Let's see. We've got a BMW 7 Series. We've got a Toyota Mirai. We've got another BMW 7 Series. I'd have to get up. In the very back, you can't even see up there, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to poke you about the Lego kit, the Aston Martin. Did you make it in the end?
No, we haven't made that yet. Yes, I gave it to Sean to work on, and he goes, yeah, maybe on the Christmas vacation.
It's a good one. It's very good for mindfulness.
Yeah, and
it has the ejector seat that works as well.
Oh, no kidding.
It's
quite involved. It's a very involved kit.
That's great.
I think Lego have really discovered the automotive industry. I mean, they do a big Charger now. They've done a Mustang Mach. They've done a big size Veyron. I think a Porsche GT3. I mean, they've got some real gearheads in the Lego team. Man.
Yeah.
So it's either cars or Star Wars.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And isn't it astonishing that here we are in the 21st century and those clever little plastic bricks still resonate with people? I mean, in young people all the way up. And you'd think that by now it'd be like completely passé. Yeah, no,
it's a testament to the brand, isn't it? And the ingenuity of it. I mean, and it's also great. I think, especially as a parent, encouraging your kids not to look at screens all the time, but actually to turn it off and actually make something is really still very compelling. And I think most adults, if they're honest, the new Lego stuff, the very advanced kits are really fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, so I didn't know about the Aston Martin one. I'll have to look that up. I might have to find one of those. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons Legos are so popular is pretty much everyone can figure out how to do it.
You sure about that? Yeah.
Yeah, John.
But about me again, Joe.
Yeah, I've had trouble. I don't know. I think I could probably do it though.
No, it's sort of like putting a puzzle together. Everybody could figure out how to do it. It's the doing it that's the challenge.
Yeah, finding the time.
You see,
it's one of those things where you have to follow the instructions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because all of us just take stuff out of a box and figure it out. But with Lego, you really do have to follow the instructions.
Right.
Did you see the little chat room thing? Lego is a gateway drug to engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Creativity.
Yeah, that's right. Well, hey, Katie, I think we can start the show now. This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 527 for October 1st of 2020. Simon Sproule, automotive man of Intrigue. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Mr. V, how you doing out there?
I'm doing good, John. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a rough week for me. I was a little bit under the weather earlier on, nothing COVID related, thank goodness. But I'd say I'm 99.99% recovered right now. So that's about as good as I'm going to get.
Back on track.
Yeah.
All right. So today in 1908, arguably one of the most significant days in history, and I bet you know what it is.
I might know this.
I bet you know what it is.
Well, if you say 1908, I believe that was the year that the Model T debuted.
And it was
today.
Right.
And it was today.
Yes.
Wow.
So it came out and it cost $850, which was inexpensive back then. There we go. Katie put up the picture. And yet it was $30 more than the average wage at the time. And so people had to stretch a little bit. And they made 15 million of the Model T, and it went out of production on May 26th, 1927. So in the event we have a show on May 26th, you might want to keep that in mind, because then that might be the question for that day. So be that as it may. Okay, I got one more thing to ask you before we start the show officially.
Yeah.
So you are a judge for the North American Car of the Year Awards, as am I. This week, the semifinalists were announced. Anything strike you as surprising or different?
Well, we had to whittle down the list. We start with the long list and we shorten that down to the short list or shorter. And it's amazing how many really good vehicles we had to broom out of the way to whittle the list down. Mm-hmm. In fact, as you know, Gary, there's a little bit of controversy because the new Toyota Sienna minivan did not make the finalist list. And, I can't recall a year where so many good vehicles just didn't make the cut, because the competition is just that tight right now.
Right. Yeah. The thing that struck me as being good and surprising, particularly good for consumers, is the fact that on the list are some cars that are not all that expensive, like a Sentra, let's say. And, there are cars that go much higher in terms of price point, such as a Mercedes or a Cadillac. And it's the same thing on the utility side, where, you can have a Kia Seltos on one end and the Cadillac Escalade on the other end. And so there are good products for people out there in the market. So I thought that was very interesting and encouraging to see.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's almost $100,000 spread between the low end and the high end there.
Indeed, there is.
Hey, we got to let everybody know we've got Joseph White from Reuters joining us back on the show again. Hello, Joe.
Hey, John. Hey, Gary.
Hey, John.
Good to be here.
Great to have you on the show.
We're good to be somewhere.
Where are you? You're at home, obviously.
I'm at home. I'm at home.
Okay, and then we've got to bring in our special guest for the day, and he's back again by popular demand by me and Gary Vasilash, at least. Simon Sproule. Bring him up. There he is.
Hi, guys.
Hello,
afternoon,
Simon.
morning. Hello.
Good to have you here.
Likewise, good to be back on. Last time I was in the studio, right? We had
That's right.
a DB11 there, and I was suited and all tied up and that sort of stuff, talking about Aston Martin, I think.
That's right. Hey, Aston just had a pretty good 24 hours of Le Mans.
They did. Ironic, I wasn't there, right? So
that's all it took.
It's like, I'm going to say all it took is me not to be there. Yeah, and I was there 5 years in a row, and then the year they won. It's great. I mean, the guys put their heart and soul into it. The team have been working towards that for so long. I think for any car company, racing is so important. Oh, particularly a company like Aston Martin. And Le Mans is part of the folklore of the company. You go back to the '59 victory, which still to this day the company celebrates, still is part of the defining characteristic of the brand. So for them to come back and sweep the board at Le Mans in the GT class and ahead of Porsche and Ferrari, I think was great. And I think probably all more sweeter given Aston's had a little bit of a bumpy few months. So it was great. It was great to see the guys having something to celebrate like that.
So Simon, catch us up on where you're at right now. What are you doing? You're no longer with Aston, and so what's the next act here?
Yeah, what did you call me? A man of intrigue or something?
And I'll explain why in a second. But go ahead, answer Gary's question.
Yeah, sure. So I've joined a tech company called TopTal that's a specialist in talent on demand. So kind of interesting. So, the world's largest fully remote company. So it's a company that was founded 10 years ago and has no headquarters, fully remote workforce, and has a talent network of about 10,000 people that are available sort of on demand for companies to go in, particularly in the developer space and in tech spaces. And then in addition to that, I'm helping out Henrik as an advisor to Fisker. So I've still kept a foot in the door, and I've got a couple of other advisory roles in play. And then finally, if that wasn't enough, I'm actually going into business and doing a startup, which I hopefully will be able to tell you about in a few months, but we're just getting going in a startup. So after 30 plus years of working for corporations, I'm finally going to take the plunge and do something myself as well. So yeah, quite a few things. It's I think 2020 has given an opportunity for a lot of people to do something different with their lives and experiment with different things. And that's certainly what I've done. It's great, really enjoying it.
And Simon, let me explain why I introduced you as the automotive man of intrigue. I wasn't going to say mystery, which one might expect, but I got to go off the top of my head here. So you worked at Ford, you worked at Jaguar Land Rover, you worked at Nissan, you worked at Tesla, you worked at Aston Martin. Am I missing any there?
Just briefly at FCA before the
and FCA as well, right?
And that was the pandemic put.
I don't know anybody else in the industry who has worked at so many different car companies, and I find that intriguing. Hence, the automotive man of intrigue.
I think, well, I've been at it over 30 years now. So that's what you kind of forget. And actually, when you look at I spent about 10 years at Ford Motor Company, including time at JLR, and about 10 years at Nissan, and then about 5 or 6 years at Aston. So there was sort of some big blocks. Within those, I was able to obviously work on different brands, and I was lucky enough to work in Dearborn for Ford, as well as back in Europe. I was lucky to go to Japan to work for Nissan and to Paris. With the Alliance, and then of course back to the home country to work on Aston. So yeah, I've been really lucky, and I've had some fascinating bosses along the way. This is what a lot of people often ask me, and I was saying to Henrik the other day, one of my bosses is a billionaire. The other one is escaped Japan and is now living in Lebanon, and then Andy's in the process of reinventing his career again. So. It's take your pick, but I've been really lucky. I've worked for an industry. I think we're all in it because we love it, and I've had a ringside seat to some of the big dramas and some of the big personalities of the industry. And I wouldn't, I'm so lucky I've been able to do that for the last 30 years.
So let's walk through some of this. I mean, so the Ford years. I mean, what do you think about related to your time there? I mean, what were the things that stand out?
Well, I've still got a pension with Ford of Britain, actually. So I'm going to be really nice about them. So exactly, not a huge one, but I was on the pension scheme when I was at the company. I joined in the early 90s when I was in Ford of Britain, and at that point, Ford was dominant. Ford was actually had taken over from British Leyland as the British motor industry, and that was when Ford was building cars in Dagenham, which of course was a modelled off the Rouge plant. It was building, Escorts up in Halewood in Liverpool, and so on and so forth. And Ford of Europe and Ford of Britain particularly were some of the most profitable markets for Ford Motor Company in the 80s and the 90s. Commercial vehicles, the Transit, which I know that Jim Farley, because his time in Ford of Europe, and he's obviously talked very highly of that segment of vehicles for Ford. So I was incredibly lucky to be at Ford at that time. I came in as the Sierra was going out and the Mondeo was coming in. And the Mondeo, if you remember, was Ford's first world car. the famed world car, and the Contour and the Mystique, if you remember those.
Sure.
And that was the CDW 27 program. I still remember the code names. So it was super interesting to see Ford go through that evolution. I was lucky enough to be alongside Richard Parry-Jones, who was, I think, one of the most outstanding automotive engineers. He was the chief program engineer on the Mondeo, if you remember, and the success of that car and the life that he breathed into Ford in terms of ride and handling and dynamics being super important to the Ford brand, particularly in Europe, and then translating that overseas. So, it was very cool to sort of see one engineer have that profound effect on an entire company and shift the sort of weight of focus onto chassis and dynamics being really important for customer satisfaction. So, and then on to some time in Dearborn. And I went through Ford 2000 as well. So, Joe, you guys probably remember reporting on this. That was Alex Trotman and his big play to globalize Ford Motor Company and to create these vehicle centers. And I went into working in the truck vehicle center right at the time when the Expedition was out, the Navigator had just come out. These were very highly profitable vehicles. Ford, the Excursion, if you remember that, which was an SUV even bigger than the Expedition. And that attracted, Joe, particularly you'll remember some of the interesting comments about the growth in the SUV market.
Yes, many of which are being repeated almost verbatim today.
Right. So the truck market was so, and is still so important to the what we might call the big three. So again, coming from Europe, and what was super interesting about that time, this was just going into 2000 and 2001, is that they moved the program development for the transit van moved from Europe to Detroit. So if you remember, you saw lots of transits running around the streets of Dearborn, really way ahead of its time. Ford had put this Eurovan into engineering into Dearborn. So that was kind of interesting to see that develop as well.
So Simon, it's interesting because you're the rare person who's worked both at very large, very global companies and also small companies. I mean, Tesla when it was small, and Aston Martin, which is obviously a sort of a different thing altogether from a company like Ford. I'm just sort of wondering, as you look ahead, what is it going to take for the large companies that used to pretty much dominate just because they were large, to make their way when it doesn't seem like the investor community is all that enamored of them anymore?
We're in a really interesting time because, and I'm seeing this in my advisory work with Fisker, is that conventional wisdom has it that we've got too many car brands, we've got too much capacity, and therefore the industry now needs to consolidate and we need to lose brands and so on and so forth. But we saw in China, 5 or so years ago, an absolute explosion of EV brands. And now we're seeing the same, I think, in North America and Europe, obviously, with a number of startup EV brands. And oddly, I think it's never been, say, easy. Making cars is really difficult. And I think that's what everyone finds out when they go into it. But actually the barriers to entry now to go in and create a car brand, oddly, have never been lower. And everyone's taking a different approach. You're seeing Nikola's approach. You're seeing obviously what Tesla have done. Henrik and what Fisker Inc. is doing is another approach, which is more like coach building, where you're taking platforms and you're working with partners. You're working with people to make the car for you, but you're providing unique IP through design and software and service. So it's you're right. The market does not reward the big players, but the inevitability of our industry is that more consolidation is going to be necessary. The question is then is which bits of the industry are carved out to make way for these new EV players. So it's watch this space, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely seems that way. It definitely seems that way. You can start a brand, you can start a brand and be taken seriously now in a way that I do think Tesla has something to do with that, right?
I think so, yeah. And I think the fact that EVs are nothing simple in our business, right? But the motor inverter battery pack and the way that's evolving, I think is enabling a lot of people to do, take platforms and do vehicles on top of them. This interest is fascinating. I remember 10 or so years ago, there was a rash of new sports car companies that started up. Then about 5 years ago, there was a rash of hypercar companies. So, I can remember working on the Valkyrie program in Aston, and we were like, wondering, will anyone buy a car over $1 million? Well, actually, the end price ended up nearly $3 million, and we were sold out. So, and you've seen a number of Gordon Murray's come back with a T50, which is a multi-million-dollar car. So this industry is really so interesting because it just constantly reinvents itself, and there's all there are trends and waves, and the Darwinianism really works in this industry, and that the fittest survive, and the ones with the greatest idea and the greatest products will prevail, and then others will wither and die. So it's still a very active business.
Does
Simon,
scale matter?
I think scale does matter. I mean, I think and I think it's the only way for buying 10 widgets is going to be a lot more expensive than buying 100 widgets. And so yes, inevitably scale does matter. But probably what's more important is brand. Is great product and a strong brand, because ultimately that's what the consumer. When have you ever seen a great product that we all? You guys drive cars all the time. You evaluate cars all the time. You instinctively know when you get in a car, this is a winner. This is right. It's priced right. It looks right. The features are right. And 9 times out of 10, it'll work in the market. So I still hold that great product planning and so forth is super important. But then if you look at, delivered cost, essential to make a margin in our business. Absolutely essential.
Simon, when you look around the world right now, most markets are mature. Certainly the Americas, Europe, Japan, Korea, China's still growing, but there isn't a whole lot of room for growth in terms of the units. There's going to be winners and losers within there, but there is tremendous potential for growth when it comes to selling services, monetizing data, offering over-the-air updates and charging for that. Now we're seeing a battle between the traditional automakers and the tech industry. Forget the startups for the moment, but the tech industry. How do you think that's going to resolve itself? Are the traditionalists going to lose that new future potential growth to the tech industries that's their playground?
Well, there's a few things to think about there, right? I mean, 5-10 years ago, there was the big sort of Silicon Valley meets Detroit moment, right? When all the tech companies thought, actually, let's get into car making. That's a really good idea. And then they quickly found out that it's really painful and really costly and really difficult to get right. And that didn't quite work out. And so then it was much more about, well, let's do technology to support automotive. And whether you believe that we're all going to end up in autonomous pods in the future, which maybe in 50 years we will, in between now and that time, there is still, I think, a market that's up for grabs. There's a mature market that's up for grabs just in segments alone. Look at the rise of crossovers that took over from the rise of SUVs and so on and so forth. So within the mature markets, they're not stable. They are moving. Electrification. The forecast rise for electric vehicles in mature markets is going to be quite profound. Well, are people going to be driving different form factors as EVs as versus what they were driving today? Is the sedan going to go away? We've all talked about the demise of the sedan, so on and so forth. Are wagons eventually going to go away? Are they only going to be a thing in Europe? So I still think there is opportunities for smart automakers to make money in segments as the mature markets evolve. And of course, people have got to figure out how to make money out of electric cars. Now, when you talk about automotive or mobility as a service, absolutely. I think this is going to be a huge battleground, and it's going to depend on a lot of environmental factors such as mass migration of people into cities, the change in how cities are managing mobility, last kilometer EV delivery, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of legislative issues that are going to come into play. What's going to be quite interesting is has the pandemic slowed down the rush into cities? Or has that put a kind of thought in people's heads to say, actually, I'm going to stick in the suburbs for a while. I don't want to be in the city.
Well, so Simon, you're raising a point I'm trying to think about a lot, because I think, yes, that seems like a really important question to figure out, is whether this sort of the idea of the pre-pandemic idea that everyone was going to be urban and therefore amenable to shared transportation. Boy, I wonder. I don't know if you can put this hat on, but your hat, the Top Towel hat, the distributed services company hat, that's kind of what they're about, I'm betting, isn't it? The sort of tapping into people who are living wherever they want to live.
Absolutely. I think the fact that I'm sitting in a friend's kitchen and doing this, and I can then we can now work. We've now proved that we can work remotely and work from anywhere. And in fact, what's interesting about the Top Towel network of of talent is that we've got people in our network that fly aid missions in Brazil and then are programmers through the TopTal talent. So the whole freelance economy has enabled people to do very different things with their lives. And it's enabled a lot of people to live, sort of two lives in one. They can pursue their passion or their interest or something, whether they want to be a teacher or whatever they want to be, and they can also then, pay the bills through working for a freelance company like TopTal. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course, freelance talent and remote talent inherently doesn't commute. So
not in the conventional way. Surely,
not in conventional. And what's really interesting is that it's borderless, right? So as long as you've got access to high-speed broadband, and you've got the requirements that the client needs for the talent job, you can be in Brunei or Botswana or Belgium, it doesn't matter, and you can be working for a Fortune 50 company. So we're talking here about quite an interesting twist on the labor market as well, and on mobility. You don't need visas if you've got high-speed internet, and the company that's hiring you is happy for you to be remote.
Hey, we've got to take a quick commercial break right now. We'll be back in just a moment to talk more automotive with Simon Sproule, automotive man of Intrigue. But first, a shout out to our good friends at Borg Warner.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
Hey, before we get going again, I just ran to the inflation calculator. So going back to your 1908 Ford Model T, Gary, at $850. Unfortunately, the inflation calculator only goes back to 1913, not 1908. But in 1913 dollars, that would be $22,300. So let's round it off, because if it was 1908, probably around $23,000 is what a Model T would have cost in today's money.
Still cheap.
Well, I know, but
right, average car is what, 35, something like that. 32,
I know,
35?
but look at the equipment you get on today's cars.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Yeah, but John, the thing is that today's cars are built on yesterday's cars. The Model T was basically built on nothing. Therefore, you're have this profound technological novelty that just costs that amount of money. It's astonishing.
Yeah, it is astonishing.
But speaking of which, so Simon, you were saying that you started your career at Ford in the UK, and John was talking about the monetization of data in vehicles, and then the notion of mobility as a service came up, and it occurs to me that Ford in the UK, as well as many other companies, are becoming shadows of their former selves in terms of making things. And in order to have vehicles that get monetization or vehicles that are part of a service, somebody's got to make them. So, where do you see that? Do you think that the footprints that car manufacturers have been building throughout the 20th century and now on into the 21st century are going to be important, or is that going to change as well?
Well, I think you've still got to have assemblers, haven't you? Now, is it going to be the rise of companies like Magna that are working as contract assemblers for brands, and Magna, comes to mind obviously as one of the best in the business of this, or is it going to be more manufacturers getting together and producing cars for each other? We've still got structural overcapacity in the industry. I don't know what the pandemic has done to the forecast, but when I last looked, we were on track for a 100 million a year industry, Joe. I think it was about that, wasn't it? And some of the forecasts were mid this decade, we're going to go up towards 110, 120 million. So there's more capacity at the moment than there is demand. So inevitably, car manufacturing is going to have to adjust to that, and it's also going to have to adjust to building different things as well. Now, you can still put an electric car down a production line, same as you can a gasoline car, but you've got other factors to consider now, which is you might not have so many engine factories, but you're going to have to build battery factories. So the value chain differs quite considerably, because you've got a lot of people moving into the value chain in the auto industry, batteries being one obvious example, that perhaps were not existing automotive suppliers. So I think that's going to be very interesting. But you've also seen, I mean, if you take Ford as a company I know and love, it shifted its manufacturing in the UK and Europe in response to the change in the market. That period in the 90s saw all of the mass brands, whether you were Renault, whether you were Nissan, whether you were Vauxhall or Opel, lose out to the premium brands. I can remember the sad day when the Ford Scorpio died. I was involved in the press launch of that car, the one that had the sort of more controversial front end. That was a great car. Had a 24-valve Cosworth V6 in it. It was it was an absolute spanking product. But the customer would rather have had for the same money a BMW 3 Series or a Mercedes 190. So you saw the rise. Production rises. BMW, Mercedes, Audi opening more and more factories. Porsche. Can you imagine Porsche builds over 250,000 cars a year at the moment?
Yeah.
So that's got to come out of somebody's hide, right? So you're still seeing these interesting shifts in what consumers want, and that affects what manufacturers can build.
It's interesting too. Simon. It's interesting too to see the sort of the debate that's going on right now in the industry about what to make and what to buy. Tesla seems to. Elon Musk. Every time I turn around, he's doing some Henry Fordish thing. He's saying we need to make the cars cheaper. I need to make the batteries cheaper so I can make the car more affordable. On the other hand, there's companies, and I guess Fisker is probably one, which seem to be much more about, look, we're providing, the design and the IP, but we're not hung up on being the manufacturer, and that's we want to partner with someone for that. And it does seem like there's at least two, if not more than two, paths that companies are exploring to sort of get to the future on going forward.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Again, you've seen the rise of the consolidation of the tier one auto suppliers as well, which is also enabling this to happen, because the big auto suppliers are doing more systems now. So someone like Henrik can go to tier one suppliers and buy chunks of things that the customer doesn't see, and then design a beautiful car, a beautiful interior around that, do unique software. The other part of it, Joe, is the leasing or ownership model, which I think is another thing. So and I know you've debated this a lot on this show about people are still going to want their own car, and I think there is still going to be demand for people to have their own car, to put their own stuff in it. We're not all going to go mobility on demand. And the lease model, so what Henrik's doing with the Fisker lease model is enabling a completely flexible lease. So often what research has shown is that customers actually want to get out of a lease after about 24 months. They want something fresh, they want something new. But most leases today, economically constructed, are based typically around 36 months, 48 months. I know the lease terms have gone up and tend to go up in recessionary times, right? Even to 72 months with incredible finance terms. But what Henrik's going to pioneer is a flexible lease model that after 2 months, if your circumstances change, you give back the car, and then the company will take back the car, recondition it, and then release it out. And we're going to manage the 8-year life cycle of the product completely within the company, which is again another model that's not really been tried before. You have certified pre-owned programs, which a lot of automakers do, which is very good for residual values because you control what's going through the auctions and the quality that's going to the dealers. But actually, the car company taking the car back and owning the reconditioning and then leasing it out under its brand is something I think quite interesting and quite different.
So they get more bites at the apple instead of just
absolutely. On an 8-year life cycle for a product, that's what 4 or 5 potential owners.
Somebody told the auto companies about continuing revenue past the sale, and they haven't forgotten it apparently.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what does the car go back out the second time as?
Well, it would go out as a used car, clearly, but it would go out at a lower lease price because it's got miles on it and it's not a new car. But of course, if you're talking about trying to get into different sectors of the market, a 6-year-old but beautifully reconditioned car is a very accessible product for a lot of people. So if they can't get into a new car at $369 a month for the Ocean starting price, I've got that drilled into my head. Ever the salesman. That price is going to be obviously less if the car is 6 years old. But that's a great value proposition for somebody who wants a reliable electric car that's is owned by the manufacturer and is is delivered by the manufacturer under its warranty system.
Of course, a key reason that you're going to have to be able to do that is to have stores or facilities that people can bring that back to. I can't imagine that you're going to want reconditioning facilities all over the place. What are the plans at Fisker to handle all that?
Well, clearly it's going to be a partnership approach. So we're still working on those partners, but both for servicing and then for reconditioning would be again. I mean, Henrik's building an asset-light company, and he's doing it more radically than I've seen any other company do it before, because he's recognizing what he wants to matter to the customer, which is the design and the experience, and then he's letting people who've got expertise and experience in building things, platform engineering, servicing, to take on those tasks.
And capacity. And capacity, right?
And capacity.
They have the capacity, whether they like it or not. So they're
Henrik doesn't have to go and put a shovel in the ground in the desert and say, "Hey, ta-da! There's a new factory building test."
I don't know any company that would do something like that.
Imagine that. So he's going to work. We're going to work with a contract manufacturer or manufacturer OEM to help us build the cars, and the Ocean is the first of several products. So we've got the flexibility to work with different partners as the segment dictates.
That's fascinating. I hadn't heard that part of the company. That is of bringing cars back, reconditioning and releasing them as used vehicles, and doing it over an 8-year cycle. I can see that penciling out quite well, provided you're able to handle all the logistics of it.
That's right, and clearly, scaling the company is going to be key to do that. But it's one of you called me a veteran, I think, earlier. As the industry, 30 years. I've seen a lot of car companies come and go and work for a lot, and this. Part of the reason when Henrik was talking to me about coming on as advisor, it's just a very interesting, different business model, and I was fascinated to sort of join forces with them and see if we can make it work. So I think the ingredients are in place. Looks very promising.
So you had your stint at Nissan. So you go from Ford, a Anglo-American company, I guess in your context it would be, to a Japanese company, which then partners with a French company. I mean, what is the dynamic at a company like Nissan? I mean, how, right now we're hearing a lot about, they're struggling in this market. They're struggling pretty much around the world. What's your sense of that organization?
I think the alliance is, it was founded originally it was Louis Schweitzer and Hanao-san, right? I mean, it was Hanao-san at Nissan who, after several failed attempts at trying to partner with Mercedes and others, and Joe, you remember this, I think, very well. It was Louis Schweitzer that did the deal, and then, I will always say Mr. Ghosn. Mr. Ghosn was put in as the chief operating officer and CEO into Nissan to make that part of it work. And, that was a bold move at the time. And the auto industry has, as we know, has not a great track record of car companies working together. There are more divorces than there are successful long-term marriages. And again, I think having a ringside seat in that and seeing the alliance evolve. So, I saw through the period when Mr. Ghosn took over joint CEO, so he became CEO of Renault as well as CEO of Nissan, and the two briefcases and that sort of thing. And the principle of encouraging two companies to work together for greater good, for greater synergies, I think is a very interesting principle, because it was always the tenet was it's not a takeover. It's two companies working together, and then they added Mitsubishi and so on and so forth. So I still think the experiment is playing itself out. Now, look, they've hit a rough patch, right? We've all been in this industry long enough to know that what do they call it in Detroit? Everyone has their turn in the barrel.
Yeah.
I mean, literally everybody. I mean, name me a car company that hasn't been through a tough time and comes out of it. I mean,
well, it's about every decade plus or minus, right? I mean, you come to the end of a product cycle, and then the organization kind of atrophies, and boom, there you go, face down. And then there's the Phoenix-like renewal, the vows never again.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of bad products or a couple of good products, and it can really turn your fortunes. And every car company's got hit with scandals and so on and so forth, and that'll derail them, and then they'll get back on track and management. So it's a fascinating period, and I think there is such a lot of inherent strength and so many smart people at Nissan and Renault and at Mitsubishi that they will prevail. I don't know if too big to fail is legitimate anymore in an industry, because we saw what happened to General Motors and others. So, but I do think within Renault and Nissan, there's a great reserve of talent there, and I think a couple of good products and get their mojo back, and there'll be a really interesting turnaround story.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch Renault, Nissan, and FCA Peugeot, because the FCA Peugeot, and again, I know you probably know a great deal more about this than any of us, but FCA Peugeot seems to be a bet that a full-on merger can be made at that scale. At that scale, can be made to work in this industry, notwithstanding the Daimler Chrysler example and several others as besides. I just interested in your thoughts on that, if you can have them in public.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll have to be very carefully guarded here, and I need to reserve something for the book that I'm hoping to write.
Okay, very well.
about all this, look, I think let's I think point to management, because management ultimately is what makes any company. And if you look at the people that are on both the FCA side and the PS side, so you've got a really outstanding management suite. I know obviously Carlos Tavares from my time at Nissan, and he's an outstanding executive, as is Mike Manley and the team at FCA. And they, what I witnessed was a tremendous mindset and willingness to make this work. So, obviously now the devil's in the detail, and they've got to bring it off. But I think the ingredients are there, and the people are there that have got deep experience in the industry and have seen what works and what doesn't work. And I think that now, we've had 20 or 30 years of mergers and demergers, and so now we've hopefully got enough accumulated industry knowledge to know what does work and what doesn't work. We hope.
Well, then let's ask you about Tesla and Elon Musk. He set a goal for the company to be a 20 million unit a year company by 2030. Is this, part of his razzmatazz selling of what could be, or do you think he can pull this off or not?
It's very hard to predict anything, isn't it, in this industry, and particularly with Tesla. So I've nothing but admiration for what they've done. I heard the stories of, and I witnessed a little bit of it when Elon went knocking on lots of OEM doors to get support way back in the Roadster days, and it's well documented. He got turned down many times, and yet look at the company now. Arguably one of the most famous, if not the most famous car brand in the world, and with zero advertising. Now you can debate the controversies and the way he's done it and so forth. But the fact remains is that, and particularly, I see this acutely sitting here in Southern California, there are Model 3s, Model Y, Model S everywhere. This is no longer a science experiment. This is mainstream, everyday motoring for thousands and thousands of people. So, I would not bet again. Now, taking 20 million in the global car market, okay, Toyota, GM, there's a lot of companies that would aspire to that same goal, right? So that's a very big chunk of the car market. But I certainly wouldn't bet against a continued increase in Tesla, because you just see it. And people love the products. The company is giving the customer what they want. So, end of story, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the importance of brand. So it almost seems that just as once upon a time, if somebody said hybrid, they thought Prius owned that, and now if you're talking about an electric vehicle, it's Tesla, and then there's everyone else. So to what extent do the traditional companies have to battle to get share of mind among consumers in terms of their vehicles being sufficiently technological as a Tesla is? Can it be done?
It's a very good question, and the sound of banging you can hear is CMOs all over the world in car companies, just so frustrated that they've invested billions in advanced technology and they can't get a break with the consumer, and that you did the sort of the word match, right? You say hybrid, you think Toyota. You say EV, you think Tesla. It's that sort of Pavlovian, So yeah, how do you break through? And you see that all the big brands are investing in in multiple technologies. Just seen the launch of the Volkswagen Id4, I think, isn't it? That's just come out. Yeah, it's a very handsome vehicle. I mean, I think it's a really well executed product. Are people now going to think, when they think of the Volkswagen brand, are they now going to think of electric? I think they're going to start to move their brand towards that space. But again, it happens over quite a period of time to change that consumer perception, right? Because if you still, if you think of a car brand, think of the first product that comes to mind. For many consumers, that image is can be quite dated. So I think it is. As the industry moves towards electrification, not everybody can be associated with electrification, because that's just going to be the industry norm. So it's then what's next? I mean, who's associated with autonomy right now? Well, you'd have to say actually Tesla. Is there any other company, any other car company in the world that's got autonomy as an instant? Oh, these are the autonomous guys. Not really. No.
But even Tesla doesn't really have autonomy, right? I mean, right now they don't.
Well, it depends on what you define as your levels, Joe, and what the legislators think. So I'm going to be careful about what I say about different autonomy levels and.
Well, at any rate, I mean, I know that
they got a lot of cameras going on.
Tesla has definitely taken on that. That word and Tesla are definitely associated in ways that that it's not with other brands. So that's certainly true. It's going to be interesting. I wonder, I mean, I sort of feel like and partly from just absorbing all sorts of different announcements about, within the last few months of some major legacy car makers saying we're going to have 1 million EVs by 2025 or however many. It does seem to me that over the next 1 to 5 years, that the real test of whether Tesla can kind of remain, sort of at the top of the mountain with everybody else still down in the, below the tree line, the way they are right now on this, because, Volkswagen, GM, Hyundai, Toyota, all of them are promising huge volumes of electric vehicles and all sorts of different body styles and all that. I don't know if you see it the same way, but it seems like this is kind of a moment that's going to define how that market looks over the next several years.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think what's super interesting is what we consider to be brand differentiators, powertrain being one of them, are arguably going to be, or are going to change, right? People are going to go over to range. I mean, you don't buy you buy cars on gas mileage, but to an extent. But I'm not sure you buy. The notion of range and of carrying a lot of range in a car, I think, is something that hasn't played out as a brand attribute. And I think there's also never been a point in time where the industry is so reliant on infrastructure to make or to realize its ambitions. I mean, when was the last time? Perhaps the expansion of the freeway network in the US post-war, the building of the autobahns and the motorways in the UK, the M1, et cetera, et cetera. That's the last time when the car industry was sort of hand in glove with legislation or kind of planning for countries and states and cities, freeway networks. Now we are, as an industry, totally reliant on an ecosystem to work. And of course, it's in our absolute interest to have that ecosystem work, because more and more people will adopt electric vehicles. And my personal peeve about the electric vehicle industry is we're engineering vehicles that are carrying too much battery capacity. If there was more fast recharging, you could reduce the size of the battery, reduce the cost, and so on and so forth. Maybe I'm an outlier here, but we're carrying around this obsession with 300 miles of range in a very big battery. Whereas actually our daily usage is probably 50 to 100 miles. And if we could more reliably have fast recharge, so you could pull in, 10 minutes later, you're back on the road with a full charger battery that will give you 150, 200 miles, you could shrink the size of the battery pack a little bit, which would then improve weight and cost of the vehicle. So, or you go ultimately inductive charging, right, which is the end goal.
Hey, we've got to take another quick commercial break here. We'll be back in just a moment, but shout out to our great sponsor, Bridgestone. We're back. We're talking all things automotive here. Gary, I know you always put a list of topics, topical topics together. I wonder if we shouldn't get into some of them and get everybody's opinion on it.
All right. So one is related to the discussion we're having right now. So Automotive News reported earlier this week that Ford before the vehicle is available, has cut the price of the Mustang Mach-E. And, and this is from the premium offering down to the entry level offering. And I mean, so Simon, as a marketing and brand guy, I mean, what do you see there? I mean, is this a good sign?
Well, I don't know the details, so I'm going to be very careful. We're, us PR guys are very careful about commenting on other people's businesses, right? You know that. But look, there's the 4 Ps of marketing and of a product and price and so on and so forth. And I don't think there's if they've decided that that's the right thing to do for the customer and the product, then they should, that's the right thing to do. I don't know the demand curve for the product. I don't know the reaction, so it's hard to say. Are they adjusting to the market? Are they adjusting based on demand or consumer acceptance? So I guess we need to see what the numbers say on a month-to-month basis.
All right, Joe,
So
you're not a PR guy.
Joe,
Well, I asked at Ford because I'm that and basically what they said and almost so many words was, look, Tesla dropped the price of the Model Y, so we need to be at the market. And I think the comparison that was put forward, which made a lot of sense to me, was sort of like shopping for airline tickets. I mean, you don't want to be out there with a ticket to the same destination that's $100 more, right? And I took this as a sign. First of all, I mean, back to what I said about Elon Musk, and he wants to keep dropping the price up to a point, keep dropping the price of his vehicles. I mean, he's clearly putting pressure on the new entries to play his game. And I guess I view this as a statement by Ford. This is, look, we're not gonna give up, and we want people to buy this vehicle. We want to get on the electric vehicle shopping list, and if that takes dropping the sticker price, so to speak, so be it. So we'll see. I mean, I wish I wish Ford had told me how many orders they have for the Mach-E. They did not. They say they're going to have 50,000 the first year, so they're not quite in the same volume league yet as Tesla, but that would be a lot of electric vehicles for Ford. So I think I took it as a sign that they're serious about getting a pretty big footprint on that in that segment and getting on shopping lists. To I think the earlier discussion about brand.
What do you think, John?
I would agree with what Joe said. I wonder too if the pricing of the Volkswagen Id4 had an impact on it as well, not just the Tesla Model Y, but I mean, that's why you cut the price. I mean, you're out to take as much pricing as you can. The marketplace tells you what you can take.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to look at is transaction price, which comes out in the registration data, right? Because you have MSRP and then you have what the customer is actually going to pay for the car. I mean, that's what Andy Palmer taught me to look at transaction price, not MSRP, which is a true test of what a customer will pay for the product in the showroom. So you're factoring in your variable marketing and expense, incentives and so on and so forth. So that will be the interesting part to look at, is how much these vehicles are transacting, and look across the industry.
Yeah, and I mean, and one last thing I'd say, because I know Ford has talked about this, and Tesla obviously does this. I mean, and we talked about it just a few minutes ago, sort of the revenue after the sale and life cycle revenue. Now, I mean, I'm not aware that Ford is trying, sort of a Fisker approach to selling the Mach-E. I don't believe they are. But I do think that they're going to try to sell things, over the air and otherwise after the initial sale. And so at some point, the MSRP, might become even more meaningless than it is right now. To sort of, what's the price of entry to a certain type of vehicle.
So Simon, do you think that in the space of the Mach-E and the ID4, that Tesla has a premium because it's Tesla?
Yes, I think so. I think Tesla occupies. If you look at the price of Tesla products, I mean, what does a Model S or a Model X top out at? 150. I mean, that's firmly into premium pricing territory. And a brand so for a brand to carry that pricing, I think by definition is premium. And so Tesla's now looking on a pricing structure, I think, a lot more like a BMW, Mercedes than it is like a Ford or a Chevrolet. What's interesting is if you pull the price down, and you've seen this with BMW, Mercedes, and Audi and so forth, you pull your price, you pull your segment down, pull the entry price point to your brand down, it can then start to erode your ability to charge top end pricing as well. So that's going to be an interesting tune for them to play.
Hey,
So
sticking with
another
Ford
thing-
for the moment, Joe, I'd love to ask you, what was your reaction to Ford dropping its CFO and CIO? First actions that Jim Farley took as the new chief executive officer as Ford this morning.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. Interesting. I mean, look, any new CEO wants to put a mark, his or her mark on the company, and bring into the senior positions people that they are comfortable with or that they think see the world the way they do. And that's what I took this as. That John Lawler, who's going to be the CFO now, is someone who's been working in Ford's mobility and autonomous vehicle area. Areas where and technology just broad, and that's obviously something that Jim Farley, or at least I think it's obvious, something that Jim Farley cares a lot about and wants someone who understands that world. In a senior level, and I honestly don't know whether the CFO, Tim Stone, I don't know whether this is a matter of he saw the handwriting on the wall and took another job or took the other job. I just honestly don't know. But and then I noticed Ford also, CIO, person in charge of data. Again, I mean, anyone who's talked with Jim Farley for 10 minutes knows that he's all about data. That's his thing, and he wants someone who understands in a pretty sophisticated way how a company like Ford can make use of data. And I'm also, frankly, the last thing I'll say is, I don't know a lot about it, but I mean, I was not surprised that Jim Farley would say, I want a dedicated chief marketing officer, not someone who's also doing another job, because he was sort of the chief marketing officer at one point at Ford himself. And I remember interviewing him, and he had the spreadsheets and all the cross tabs and this all this data. It's just, I'm not surprised that he wants someone who's going to drill down on that stuff in kind of the way that he would do, and come to him and say, hey, look, this is what we ought to be doing to maximize revenue on this product or that product or the other product.
That makes absolute sense. I just wonder, Joy Filatico now, from having marketing and Lincoln, now just having Lincoln, what her life is going to be like going forward. I'm sure it'll be easier by getting one job off her plate, but man, Lincoln's got to have a
the eyebrow raise was for easier. I don't know how easy it's going to be to make Lincoln successful back to the conversation we've been having here, in a world where you've got brands coming, just springing up out of the ground, right? Going after a premium customer with a high-tech electrified offerings that, the sort that Lincoln currently doesn't have. I don't know, Simon, I defer to you on that. You know this world better than I do.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I find it fascinating. You had, I think, they had a design on from Cadillac on the last show, right? And I was listening to that and so forth. And the occupying that space of American luxury has always been something that the big three have studied very hard. And again, they've all had their ups and downs, right? I mean, I can remember speaking to Bo Botman over at Galpin, one of the world's largest Ford dealers, and Bo was very involved, he told me, in the Lincoln SUV products, particularly from a dealer input. And the reason why they look so good, and I think that the interiors are incredibly well executed on the Lincoln SUVs, was putting a lot of attention to that. And Bo was one of the guys that was saying this is super important for customers, and transaction prices bear out, and the truck is hot, as they say. Now, again, they've got the same challenges as every other brand, as you said, is that there is a rash of new challenges coming in, which are pure play EV. There is no sort of, well, are they hybrid, are they this, are they that? They're EV. They stand for EV, and that's all they stand for. And they've got one purpose in life, and that's going to be really hard for brands to make that transition. I can remember when we looked at relaunching Lagonda at Aston Martin, and there was a big debate over how we should launch Lagonda. And there was one camp that said, let's do rebodied Aston Martins, bit of hybrid, bit of this, V12, sort of rival to a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley. And then there was another camp which said, let's go scorched earth, radical, space age, EV, let's take Rolls-Royce and Bentley out. They're going to iterate technology, whereas Lagonda can go straight in. And that was that was how we played it when we launched the cars at Geneva. So I hope they still deliver that plan one day, because the cars look really cool. And there was no offering no pure place EV offering in the luxury market. Still isn't. There's nothing above $150,000. You know, if you're a billionaire who wants to go EV but wants the luxury comfort of a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, there isn't an offering in that 150 to 300 or 400 price segment. So there's it's not a huge ocean, but there's definitely a blue ocean space there for companies there.
Isn't that the space though that Pininfarina is looking to?
To an extent, they've gone sports car route. So what Lagonda was not sports cars. I mean, if you talk about brand portfolio, Aston Martin, Lagonda, what Lagonda also enabled Aston Martin to do was to remain focused on sports cars and inevitably an SUV, which is what everybody wants to drive. But Pininfarina, I think I remember from Geneva Motor Show a year or two back, they've gone for sports cars, at least in their initial offering. Lagonda was really touring cars. I mean, it actually won Le Mans back in the 30s. Lagonda, it's a fascinating history if you ever sort of research it. But in its latter years, in the 70s and so forth, it was these wedge sedans and it was sort of big luxury cars. So we wanted to give Lagonda a new lease of life, and we figured why not go straight for EV and have it as the elevator pitch. What's Lagonda? It's an all-electric luxury car. That's it. That's all you need to understand.
Mm-hmm. So another interesting thing I think this week is, for whatever reason, Nikola came out with a lengthy press release which described what it is and what it is doing. And it has this statement that I've got to read because it sort of puts it into context of how nice they're being. I don't know if that's the right word here, but it says, Nikola is an original equipment manufacturer whose expertise lies in design, innovation, software, and engineering. We assemble, integrate, and commission our vehicles in collaboration with support from business partners and suppliers that bring decades of experience in manufacturing and that have invested billions of dollars in industrializing and scaling production. Nikola designs and engineers its vehicles and works with business partners and suppliers to manufacture a majority of the vehicle components. So now, John, when we had Trevor Milton on the show, it seemed to me that he was basically saying, you know what, we're disruptive. We're not doing anything that these other guys are doing. I read that, and it sounds like you could put in any OEM's name, and that's what they do.
I think, Gary, you're missing the sign on the front of the door. Nikola, I say Nikola, by the way. Anyway, whatever. You're missing the sign on the front of the door, under new management.
Yeah.
You asked me about Jim Farley. You want to talk about somebody putting a stamp on something under new management? You know, Mr. Milton is not there anymore.
So this is Stephen Gursky.
Steve Gursky and Mark Russell. I had a short interview with them along with my colleague Ben Clayman. I mean, I'll just speak this because I was involved in writing something about this, but I don't know if Simon, you want a shot at it too. But yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to the point that I think, Simon, you made earlier about sort of the different approach. I mean, Nikola is basically saying, look, no, we're not going to reinvent a lot of stuff or even invent it. We're going to be more of an integrator and bring a design and a concept and certain other kinds of intellectual property. But we're not going to try to claim that we are, we have our own, every single piece of hardware is our own. And there's two things quickly that were pointed out. One, and the reason why they did this, of course, is their stock price was in the tank because of a short seller attack. And I happen to be looking at it right now on my screen. It's up 16% today, and it was up almost that much or about that much yesterday. So this kind of worked. So basically saying, look, no, we actually have a pragmatic approach to, creating a brand of trucks and a pickup truck, leveraging existing investments made by players whose names and we're also going to try to build a recurring revenue network for service and refueling. That's our plan, and we're going to do it. I can't remember exact words that Mr. Russell used, but it was one step at a time. He used that phrase a couple of times. Not disruptive, not magic, one step at a time. And that, I don't know, like I said, I'm looking at the ticker right now, and it's 16% up just today. So that's what it seems like. I don't know, Simon, if you've been watching that, but yeah.
I think it's probably safe to say this industry is the gift that keeps on giving. And I think that's really all, as far as I want to go on that topic. So, we're a very competitive business, and everyone comes with fresh ideas, and that's a good thing for the consumer.
What's your take, John?
Well, I was going to say essentially what Joe just said there. When we had Trevor on the show, we heard Trevor's version of how everything was going. And with the statement that you just read, is pure Stephen Gursky. Everybody trying to smooth down the feathers, get the investors comfortable. They're still negotiating a deal with General Motors here. I believe that deal probably will go through. But remember, when GM signed the deal, it was getting a stock package worth $2 billion. It dropped down to $1 billion. I'm sure they called up Steve and went, hey, back to the negotiating table. And that's what they're going through right now. My guess is people are talking. And Joe, you pointed out that the stock is up. They're expecting, I guess, that a deal is going to go through.
Yeah, the investors definitely seem to be not seem to believe. The company said, and the investors are buying into the idea that they're gonna get the partners that they need. GM is going to get landed. The energy partners that they've been talking about for the hydrogen refueling are going to get landed. Obviously I don't know for sure, but the investor community in the last 2 days seems to be more confident that that's actually going to happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, and look, and Gary, I've said this all along. The real innovation with Nikola and Trevor Milton was not the technology. His partners had the technology. It was Hanwha and Iveco and Bosch that had the technology. I believe that the new idea that Trevor was bringing to the party, so to speak, was a vertically integrated approach to providing subscription services for trucking fleets, where you pay by the mile and it includes everything, including the fuel. All you got to do is stick a driver in it and deliver the beer or whatever you're hauling. So I still think that business plan makes a lot of sense, particularly if you do go hydrogen, of generating it on site at the fueling station and not trying to ship it all around the country, which would really help lower the cost. That is by doing it on site. I believe that his partners have stuck with him, or stuck with Nikola at least, because they see that as a very viable business plan.
So it was mentioned at the start of the show about sticking a shovel in the ground in a desert and saying we've got a factory. And part of the release is they're pointing out that they plan to have construction fully completed in mid-2023 in their plant in Coolidge, Arizona, to begin building things. So Joe, what is that all about?
Yeah, that's the part I don't know as much about. Yes, they say they're going to have a plant in Coolidge, Arizona. I'm not quite sure why Coolidge, Arizona is the place to have a truck plant. I'm just not sure why. Yeah, it's flat, I guess, and land's probably cheap. Anyhow, that's what they say. I have no basis on which to dispute it. I don't know where the supply chain is relative to that place, but like I said, maybe it all pencils out. That part I can't enlighten you too much on.
So another thing that really caught my eye this week, and maybe it'd be a sour note, but anyway, that we were talking earlier about suppliers doing more for OEMs and bringing more capabilities in, and one of the premier tier 1 suppliers in the world, Continental, announced that they're likely to be getting rid of 30,000 employees. A huge chunk of people. And yet, I read what others write, and it seems that I thought that the auto industry was back. I thought things were swell. I thought that it was all going back to the way it was. And apparently Continental doesn't think that's going to happen until the mid-decade. Does anybody have an opinion on this?
Well, I'll kick it off.
Silence.
No, go ahead, John. I do have opinions, but
Yeah. Number one is, there's the COVID impact, and that has wiped out the travel industry. It's wiped out the tourism industry. That's going to take years to recover. So volumes are going to be down globally, and Continental's a global player. But the bigger thing is they're a big player in traditional internal combustion engines. And
Yeah,
there is
that's it.
zero growth in that, guys. It's all going to be electric. That is, the growth is going to be in electric. And this is a bigger discussion in Europe, especially Germany, than it is in the United States or in Asia. That what do? We've got billions and tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands, that have got jobs making pistons and piston rings and spark plugs and injectors and all this other stuff. And nobody wants to stay in that game right now. They want to be in the growth industry because that's what the market is rewarding. And I think that is the major part of what these cuts are all about.
Yeah, I know. I second that. And I also smell a little bit of let no crisis go to waste here. I mean, which you've seen at some other companies. I mean, you're absolutely right, John. I mean, especially in Europe, especially in Germany, the internal combustion, sunset has begun. And whether or not that's true or whether the customer is in on that piece of information, we'll find out soon enough. But from a capital deployment point of view, the sunset is well underway. And you're right. I mean, 30,000 people. It's a whole lot of people, but I do suspect that some of this is just the management saying, no time is better than now to do painful, unpleasant things and get ourselves in the right shape for what comes next. That's my suspicion on that one.
Anything, Simon?
No, well, I mean, look, just up the road in Disneyland, 28,000 people. So it's gut wrenching, isn't it? I mean, and businesses have to do what they need to do to survive, and that's based on current conditions and the forecast. And I think there's a lot of factors that are at play here. There is outright demand, and then there's within the demand that it does exist. Is that going to be more EV demand versus ICE demand? And I think inevitably, as John said, it's the shift is going to be towards car companies buying more electric. Batteries, motors, inverters, things that make up electric cars as opposed to internal combustion cars. And those suppliers with very long-term planning horizons, of which Conti and others, they're such big, they're bigger than automakers in many senses. They've got to make big long-term decisions, capacity decisions, and so inevitably, there's going to be some pain along the way if they see a shift combined with an economic downturn.
The other thing, Gary, I mean, to your point about the auto industry being back, I mean, U.S. automakers, or at least most of them, are reporting their third quarter sales today as we speak. General Motors was saying that they expected the annualized sales pace for the third quarter to be about 15.9 million, which, is not great relative to 2018 or 2019, but it's unbelievable compared to what we would have thought 6 months ago if you'd have asked what would the SAR be for the third quarter of this year, or certainly 3-4 months ago. So, yeah, it's back kinda, but Simon, the point you made about Disney and the big layoffs, I mean, I don't know, I'm not particularly confident about the strength of the labor market over the next quarter, because companies do have a way of looking at their year-end accounts and saying, and the next, I don't know. I mean, you predict the next 6 to 12 months of economic activity. So I do think that there's some risk that the unemployment picture is going to look worse in the next several months than it does even right now, just because you're going to have these big companies doing big layoffs. I just wonder if that's going to be a thing. So, we'll see.
Yeah, and the shame of it is for our industry is there's so many great cars coming out, right? I mean, really across all categories. I mean, all the investment that has gone on in the last few years, these cars are now coming to market.
The boom cars are coming. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and there's some really great. I mean, you were just talking before the show about the car of the year, in the North American car of the year and the selection. I mean, there's a very high bar, right? There's some really great cars out there, and they're coming into a market that's inevitably smaller than they were planning for.
And I wonder if Ford sees this being a problem and saying, you know what, for the Mach-E, which will be coming out toward the end of the year, when things are likely not to be so good. Cox Automotive chief economist Jonathan Smoke this past week was saying, he thinks the fourth quarter is just got a whole lot of headwinds, and cautioned against taking the September numbers and saying, "Whoo, it's things are looking great." And maybe that's what a lot of companies are now having to face. That they put all of this investment in terms of electrification or automation or what have you, and then suddenly they're going, "Holy gosh, there's the market is beginning to shrink again."
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm still trying to understand this, and I'm not going to pretend that I fully do. But the motivations around, I call them legacy companies. I probably should stop doing that. But anyway, a traditional company like Ford wanting to sell EVs, there's a lot of reasons they want to do that, and one of them, which would also explain a price cut, even if you didn't think that, even if you thought, look, affluent customers are going to buy this vehicle and they're going to be fine, even if you thought that, is that you've got to make darn sure that you sell these EVs so that you can have the credits to sell your F-150s and your F-250s. And, why is Volkswagen being so aggressive or seemingly aggressive with the Id4? Same thing, right? They need to get those things on the ground so that they can sell, Atlases, their large SUV. So I think there's a lot for us to learn about sort of the economic decisions around EV pricing by the traditional automakers.
Look, it's going to be hard to predict where anything is going. Simon, you mentioned Disney getting ready to lay off 28,000 people. The airlines are on the verge right now of announcing major layoffs. It's all going to depend on the spending bill that comes out of Congress. Remember, what was it, 5 months ago or something, we got a $3 trillion tranche that really has kept the economy going all this time. Now that money is running out, and there's a big argument in Washington, which can't seemingly get anything together, of whether you have another big spending bill or a skinny bill, as they call it. If there's another big bill, I think we're good to go. If it's a skinny one, yowza. I think we're going to come up short with a lot of money, and things may not look so good by the end of the year. That's my opinion. I'm not trying to make a political statement. All I'm trying to say is this damn pandemic has ripped and torn a gigantic hole in the economy. And unless you plug the gap, it could be pretty ugly.
All right. So I want to end by asking Simon, what is your favorite car? You've probably had access to more cars than the three of us, and we have access to lots of cars. So what is it?
First car I launched as a PR guy was the Escort Cosworth. That was incredible.
Good car.
That was the T25 small turbo Escort Cosworth. That was really something pretty special. You always remember your first company car, which was a Mondeo V6. Which you remember that V6 motor, the Duratec motor. First Jag I had, which was an XKR, which was pretty special. I was 30 years old, and I was in a Jaguar company car. That was pretty cool.
Austin Powers.
Right. So actually, that's another story with Jason Vines about Austin Powers 3 and the Jaguar. Anyway, we'll save that for another show. And then
the book.
Yeah, exactly. Working on the Nissan GTR, which was a project that Mr. Goen was very personally involved in. We met every month for about 3 years. Every month for 3 years. To work on the launch of the R35 GTR, which debuted in 2007 at the Tokyo Motor Show. So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, I had a Tesla Model S, which was great. That was really cool. My first electric car. Sorry, I know you asked for one, but we can't stop at one, can we? And then I bought an Aston Martin. So I got a 1991 Virage 6.3 Work Special, which is pretty fun. So that's sitting back in the UK. So that's sort of a bit of a toy. And then, when I left FCA, actually, I decided to get a Alfa Romeo Giulia. And I know you guys have all driven that. And it was the European Car of the Year. It's an outstanding car. Really, really a lot of fun. So there are lots of cars that stand out. And then my first Aston Martin sort of company car. That was also pretty cool.
So, Simon, you'll be pleased to hear I just did an interview this week with Bob Roterdorf, who runs Alfa operations in North America. He says you're going to be stunned. We're going to be stunned when the next J.D. Power surveys come out, especially with IQS. He claims they're going to end up with best-in-class residuals. They'll be announcing that fairly soon. And I just looked at the FCA numbers today, and Alpha sales in the US were up 17% over a year ago. Now, admittedly, the numbers are small, but nonetheless, I think it's very possible that Alpha's turning the corner here.
It's a great car. I mean, if you want a compact sports sedan and it's not like everything else out there, the Giulia's an absolute sweetheart. I love it. I got the base rear-wheel drive, not the quadrifoglio, just the base rear-wheel drive with a couple of extras, and it's great. Really, really fun car. I went out driving with some buddies of mine, and they all have Porsche GT2s, so big, heavy machine, big kind of high performance machines. And I think I had more fun than they did on the Los Angeles Crest Highway and that sort of stuff. We went out driving a couple of weeks ago. So Alpha's a great car, really fun.
All right, John. So I've got to ask. You looked at the numbers, and I've got them here, but I won't look at them. Is it Stelvio that's selling a lot of vehicles for Alpha, or is it Giulia? Because it's not the 4C.
You know what? If I remember right, they're almost even Steven.
Really?
So it's not like a big split heavy SUV and small sedan. I want to say they're very close to each other in sales, but I'm going off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
all right, so that's all I got.
Yeah,
okay.
We all know what's going to drive the bus at FCA. It's the Grand Wagoneer. Get yours today.
Absolutely.
That's right, Joe. Well, hey, Gary, thank you for ending the show on a positive note there. That's really good. And Simon, thanks so much for coming back on. It's such a pleasure talking with you, and we can go anywhere with the discussion. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Joe, always great having you on the show, too.
Thanks. Good fun.
John.
Simon, good to see you.
And Gary, you and I will just keep on doing this. Okay. So long, folks.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone. Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.